We are delighted now to be joined by Gemma O'Doherty, who is an award-winning journalist and filmmaker. She has branched into film in the last year or so, and she has a very, very powerful film about the longest missing person case in Ireland. And actually, weirdly, the story is about a child. Weirdly and extremely sadly, I have to say, the story is about a child. Good morning to you, Mary, or good morning to you, Gemma.
Good morning, Eileen. I'm delighted to be on your show.
Well, we're delighted now to have you. So, I mean, it's such an interesting film, Mary Boyle, The Untold Story. I have to confess, I first came upon this story on Facebook, actually, because the film was actually posted up on Facebook. Someone had shared the film, and to be honest, I kind of saw it, and you know, sometimes you get all sorts of kind of strange things on Facebook, and we've been hearing a lot about that lately, about false news sites and clickbait and things like that. So I think the general media are very, very concerned about the type of things that are popping up in people's posts. But I actually read about a double page, a big giant article about yourself in a really, I think it's a fabulous independent publication called Rabble. It's an Irish publication, and there was a very long interview with yourself about journalism and I guess about the importance of journalism in the world today. And it also talked about this film of yours, which is completely groundbreaking in its nature as a documentary and the way you're reaching your audience. But maybe, I know you have a few screenings coming up in Donegal next week, Gemma, and I know you're very much looking forward to that. So maybe tell us a little bit, take us back and tell us a little bit about the film itself and why you made it.
Well, I've been an investigative journalist working out of Dublin for many years now, but a few years ago I got involved in a case of a priest who had been murdered in 1985 in County Offaly, and it was an appalling cover-up by the Gardaí, by other institutions of the state, and I worked on that case for a while, and as a result of that work other people started to approach me with their cases, and one of those cases was that of Mary Boyle, Ireland's longest and youngest missing person, and she vanished almost 40 years ago. Next March it will be 40 years, in Donegal, on a very remote farm belonging to her grandparents. And she disappeared after going for a walk with her uncle across very remote farmland, and she was never seen again. Not a trace of any evidence connecting to her was ever found. And through the years the media and the Gardaí put out a line that she had been abducted by a stranger, but when I went to investigate that case I realised that the evidence was pointing in another direction, and I spoke to the first officers on the scene, who are now retired, and they were convinced that Mary had been murdered by somebody known to her, and I also got to know her identical twin sister, Doherty, and she was also of the same belief, as was a distant cousin of the child, Margot O'Donnell, very well-known country singer. So I brought all of those together and made this documentary, which I released on YouTube in July. And I was forced to do that really due to the problems within the media in the Republic, and the fact that, you know, the media really is not able or willing to take on the political establishment and the Gardaí and the judiciary and many powerful institutions in the state. And I wanted as many people to see the documentary as possible. And it's nearly had 250,000 views at this stage. So very delighted about that, because, you know, our criminal justice system in the south is in tatters, unfortunately.
Gosh, it's actually such a shocking story, and it's shocking. It has taken, and it hasn't been solved. Of course, I mean, 40 years to sort this out.
It could be solved in half an hour, because the first officers on the scene spoke to the individual who they were convinced was responsible, and they were absolutely in no doubt as to his guilt. But unfortunately, the most shocking thing about this case is that in the days after Mary's disappearance, a telephone call was made by a politician to the local Garda station to instruct the Gardaí not to arrest the chief suspect, and he has been protected ever since. And since I put out my documentary, and since the Gardaí made these allegations on camera, they were very clear about this phone call, and that as a result of the phone call, they were to look in another direction, is exactly how they put it. Huge pressure has been brought to bear on all of us involved in the documentary. So instead of doing the right thing and arresting the killer and trying to find Mary's remains, because we really do believe her remains can be found and she can be given a decent burial, instead the focus has been put on us, all of us who are involved in the documentary. And we've suffered as a result, but we will continue to expose the truth about this child's murder, because it's representative of many other cases, cases that must be solved, cases that have been covered up as a result of Garda corruption.
Gosh, and I mean, I know you feel obviously very strongly about the Garda corruption, but in this case, it's so frightening to think that the press are kind of not helping, with this story.
It is, and we've seen around the world recently how the public are reacting to the failure of the media to defend the public interest. And, America, the reaction to, I suppose, how the mainstream media were not telling the American public the truth about what was going on in the run-up to the election, and in particular in relation to the Clintons. As a result of that, I believe that's why Donald Trump was elected, because the public no longer trust the media and other powerful institutions, and this was a reaction to the media and to the fact that the public believe that they're just not being told the full facts by the media anymore, that the media are embedded with power. And down here in the South, it's a situation that, it's an embarrassment at this stage, but it's very dangerous for democracy when this happens. And unfortunately, the relationships between press and politicians and police are far too close. They're toxic, in my opinion. And a lot of journalists down here are under the control of the political establishment, and they're not doing their job without fear or favour. They're not serving the public interest, and as a result, our democracy is at risk.
Okay, it's very, very frightening. I mean, I studied journalism a few years ago here at the Northwest Regional College, and I remember, we were taught, journalists are supposed to be the eyes and ears, for the public. They are public servants. We have to work in the interests of the public, but it becomes very scary indeed when you start to, when you're living in a place and it happens everywhere. And actually, I spoke to a very interesting man a little while ago called Brian Gerish. I would definitely encourage people to check him out. Brian Gerish, Gerrish, who runs another alternative media site called UK Column. And, he would talk, again, be the type of man, they're approached by people all the time, with stories that the local press in particular just aren't publishing. And actually for a finish, he started the UK Column because of that, because there were so many issues in the place where he lived, which was Plymouth in England, and they just weren't being covered. So they actually set up their own newspaper. But of course now with the whole digital media scenario, now of course they have a website and they actually have a live news show every day, I think Monday to Friday, which you can also get later on the player. But I don't know, there's a digital revolution going on, definitely, and I don't know, to some extent it is a little bit of a bubble, in that you kind of might think you're kind of free in the internet when you're on the internet and getting all sorts of stuff. I kind of imagine it a little bit like zorbing, you know, that sport, zorbing, where you're put into like this little plastic bubble and allowed kind of float around the place. But definitely, I don't know, more stories are getting out there now because of digital media.
I think so. It's you know, the internet has brought a revolution in media. Obviously, we've a lot of responsibilities as well as rights. We've, you know, great scope as journalists, journalists who believe the public interest is being failed. We have great opportunities now to tap into, you know, what the internet has given us, and you know, we see how newspaper circulations are hemorrhaging. The mainstream media is in crisis. I think an awful lot of people down here are going to be seriously considering their TV licence, because RTE, RTE, you know, has a hashtag which trends a lot of the time on Twitter. It's RTE bias, and instead of being known as Radio Telefís Éireann, its new name is representing the elite in some media quarters, in some Twitter and social media quarters. That is what it is seen to do. And its behaviour over recent cases has just been reprehensible. In relation to the Mary Boyle case, they haven't asked me to do any interviews about the case. And, you know, I would believe they're trying to keep it from the public, but failing. So the public are losing trust in the mainstream media, and they are turning to other sources where they believe stories that affect them are being told. And, yeah, it is great that is happening. You know, that's definitely a very positive thing. But people do, and I'm saying this quite a lot when I do screenings, you know, when people ask, what can we do? They have to really start thinking about the media that they're consuming. When, for example, you know, they go in on a Sunday morning into their local newsagent and pick up a Dennis O'Brien newspaper, you know, they have to accept then that the stories they will be told, which by and large will be pro-government, and pro-vested interests, they can't complain if they continue to support news organisations like that. And the same with RTE, you know, that it's such a knee-jerk thing to watch 6 o'clock news and the 9 o'clock news every day here down in the south. But it's, you know, people need to start thinking, am I actually being told what I need to be told? And I think that people maybe are starting to get a bit wise to that and are switching off, which is what I think they need to do.
Okay. I mean, it's interesting that we were talking about the recent elections, well, the US elections, which I actually stayed up and watched. But previously to that, the Brexit vote, and the same, I stayed up to watch that. And with Brexit, you were kind of just watching a car crash unravel, to be honest. And I remember kind of watching it, you know, and in some ways feeling really great that actually, you know, the opinion polls were all wrong, you know, and people were kind of reacting, because people, I don't know, a lot of people turn off politics when they hear so many stories of corruption and things like that. People just switch off, and, you know, life is hard enough, and they just plough on and do their own thing and do their own, you know, their own jobs and live in their own worlds and don't bother about other things. They get really, really tired. So I think Brexit was really kind of a spark, you know, and a lot of people here in particular in Northern Ireland are very worried about the outcome of Brexit. But it came as a huge surprise to nearly everyone I know here. I have to say, everyone I know, it came as a huge surprise. But with the US elections, it was actually almost like the same thing all over again, because I actually watched it on the BBC because their infographics, you know, their graphs and things were so good. And at the start they were quite, you know, again like Brexit, they were quite sure, you know, that Trump wasn't going to get in, and the whole night it just became like Brexit all over again, you know. But I could not believe it, because the panel started off a little bit full of themselves, like, to be honest. They were a little bit smug, you know, especially when they were talking about Trump and everything. But as the night went on, I was so shocked at one point when one of the journalists on the panel said, let's go to Russia and see what they're doing over in Russia. And I thought, God, how many times would you hear that on a BBC panel? You know, a news thing, let's go to Russian news, nearly. You know, I just thought. And actually one of the panel then later on kind of looked a bit sheepish and said, well, actually, you know, they kept saying, why are all the opinion polls so wrong? Why was everyone so wrong about this? Because the results that were coming in were just devastating. And I don't know, one of the panel members kind of said, yeah, well, I think a lot of people are getting their news from alternative sources. You know, and again, for a BBC journalist to admit that on a panel, I found that really shocking, you know, in terms of how things have changed.
Yes, I mean, what the Trump victory and Brexit have shown is how completely out of touch the mainstream media is with the public and with grassroots communities, utterly out of touch. And that's because they're embedded with the elite. And, you know, they've got a serious kicking and they've made a show of themselves. None of them predicted that Trump would win. I mean, certainly very, very few of the talking heads here in Dublin predicted that. I had a sneaking suspicion it was going to happen. I was very interested in corruption in the Clinton Foundation, and I would have had very serious concerns about Dennis O'Brien's links with that foundation. He is the biggest Irish donor to the Clinton Foundation and is the biggest owner of private media in Ireland. And, well, we know that Donald Trump actually issued a statement about him in the run-up to the election. So, you know, certainly it is proof that the media are out of touch. They're not doing their basic job, which, in my opinion, is to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable and to hold power to account. They're not doing that. And, you know, as a result, we're seeing incredible things happen around the world which are damaging global stability and will have serious repercussions. I mean, in next week, Austria is likely to elect the first far-right European EU head of state. And, you know, this is going to have serious repercussions for the rest of the EU. This particular individual, Hofer is his name, has some very far-right ideas. Some of them are very, very disturbing. And I would also put that down to a failure of the European media to monitor what is going on and to how people are actually feeling on the ground as they failed to do in the run-up to Brexit.
It's a strange one. You mentioned earlier about the embarrassment of the Irish media, about being embarrassed, people feeling embarrassed about the lack of kind of news and stuff like that. And it's only in the last month or so I've been kind of thinking, like, at what stage when you're actually living in a country? Now, you know, our media love kind of talking about Russia and China and, you know, Korea and how, you know, people there can have no freedom and they don't get doing this and they don't get to hear about that, and the Arab countries as well. And it's very easy to kind of look at other countries and kind of go, oh, you know, we're so lucky here, we live in a democracy, you know, we have freedom of the press. But at what stage do you actually kind of realise, God, actually we haven't?
That's the great deceit. Yes, I mean, we've been listening to an awful lot of nauseating stuff about Cuba in recent days, you know, and I find it hilarious to listen to the likes of RTE talking about, you know, how basic freedoms did not pertain to the Cuban population under Castro. I mean, it's just laughable. It really is. When we live in a country that is so at risk as far as media ownership is concerned. I mean, this has been recently stated in an academic report, you know, showing that it states clearly that Ireland's media it lacks plurality, diversity, and is over-concentrated. It's, RTE and the Dennis O'Brien media have far too much control. And, we don't have press freedom in Ireland, and yet we're accusing developing countries of failing. We're not looking at ourselves. Total hypocrisy on the part of the media.
I'm just conscious here now of time, but Gemma, tell me now, your film Mary Boyle, The Untold Story, it is available on YouTube, so anyone who's listening in can go to YouTube. They can also go to your social media page on YouTube, on Facebook. You're on Facebook, on social media, just Gemma O'Doherty. You can click make a friend request, and also the little ribbon, there's a little purple ribbon comes up at your name. The purple ribbon is a symbol of this campaign to solve this particular case. But tell us now, the film is also going to be shown in several venues next week in Donegal. Maybe you could tell us where those are going to be.
That's right, yes. So we're going to be screening it in Gweedore, right in the heartland, really, of where little Mary grew up, on the 7th, so that's next Wednesday, in the local community centre there. It's called Ina Nave Pádraig, and that's going to be at 7:30 p.m. So that's Gweedore on Wednesday evening, and then we'll be going to Killybegs on Thursday evening, where it will be shown in the Bayview Hotel. So we're delighted to have that facility, a lovely hotel there in Killybegs, and that'll be Thursday evening. And then it's going to be shown to a group of students in Letterkenny on Friday. So, it's great actually that a big school in Letterkenny has asked me would I be willing to screen it and show it to their students. So I'm delighted to be able to do that. So I'll be doing a question and answer session after each screening, and talking about some of the new information that I didn't put in the documentary, and the new developments in the case. So I really would encourage anyone, who has an interest in the case to come along. Entry is free, and we really need the people of Donegal and Derry to get behind this case now and put pressure on the authorities. It's over a year since Anne Doherty and her lawyer Dara Mackin met Taoiseach Enda Kenny. Nothing has happened as a result of that. They have pleaded with the Gardaí to arrest the chief suspect. That has not happened. And as time passes on, the likelihood of finding Mary's remains dwindles. And it's just a terrible tragedy for every citizen. Everyone who cares about Ireland needs to care about this case and get behind it, because we are determined that justice will be done for this child.
Okay, just lastly, before you go, I was at a recent screening of the film, and after the film was shown, it was shown actually here in the city as part of the WOW Women of the World Festival. There was an American lady who was over visiting. She was over sitting in the front row, and after seeing the film, and I was really shocked that she said this, after seeing the film she kind of said, God, I would be afraid to live in Ireland. I would be afraid to live in Donegal, the woman said.
She did say that, that's right. Yeah, they were Californian tourists, I think, weren't they?
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I think they were planning to go to Donegal for a few days, but they said they would be frightened. And Donegal is a frightening place, and it's frightening because of what can be covered up, but it's not unique to Donegal. But, unfortunately, we have seen scandal after scandal involving An Garda Síochána, involving the current Commissioner, Noreen O'Sullivan. Very damning, what should be a damning report is due out later this week in relation to her treatment of Garda whistleblowers. And it is frightening when the people who are supposed to protect you turn their backs on you and fail to uphold law and order. So yes, I mean, those people are right to feel that Donegal is a scary place. It scares me to think that a child's murder could be covered up and her killer. And we must also remember that Mary Boyle was sexually assaulted before she was murdered, according to the first officers on the scene and her twin sister. And she was a 6-year-old child. So, the fact that a case like that is still being covered up in 2016 is very disturbing for every citizen.
I know, and I mean, there's been so much has come out over the years about all these child abuse cases and the clergy cases and the clerical cases and stuff like that. But this is something kind of almost different again, and it's like almost like the other stuff. I mean, I feel awful saying this, but it was like the tip of the iceberg, because there's just so much more kind of needs to come out, I guess. But anyway, you're doing wonderful work, Gemma. I hope you're looking after yourself and keeping safe, because I know it's a very dangerous job being an investigative journalist, and especially trying to unearth the truth and trying to create change.
Well, it has its moments, but, thank you very much, Eileen, and well done for your show and for airing issues like this, because there's very few media that want to talk about cases like this. So you deserve great credit for that. And I hope the people of Derry, I'm sure they do really appreciate the work you're doing.
Okay, and I mean, just the other last thing about this case, even though the film is up on YouTube and it hasn't been broadcast, I suppose, on the mainstream media, but in terms of festivals, like, the film is going all around the world, winning awards all around the world, and as you just mentioned earlier, like, the film was only up and running a couple of months and you've already got 250,000 views. So I mean, it's going to have to. So it's going to have to be resolved, this case, and many others like it. So listen, take care of yourself, and we'll hopefully get an update from you soon. And as I say, people, check out Gemma O'Doherty on Facebook, and you'll be able to see then more about the upcoming screenings, and keep in touch that way. And of course, anyone listening who would like to have a screening at their venue, you can also get in touch with Gemma via Facebook as well. Okay.
That's right. Thanks so much, Eileen.
Not at all, not at all. And the best of luck there with everything, okay?
Thank you. Take care.
Okay, so that was it. That was Gemma O'Doherty there. Very, very busy lady, saving the world. But also, most importantly, she is trying to help with this longest missing person case about the missing child, Mary Boyle. Hard to believe it was 40 years ago. Anyway, let me see. I'm going to play a little track here now.